Assalamu alaikum, this is Fatwa Wazwaz, and I want to speak about the Ramadan spirit or the worship spirit, feelings, and struggle. Um, Quite a few times I have heard, and I have seen and observed where people will talk about things like, they're not feeling it anymore, um, or you can observe that their faith is slipping away. Or, we used to go to the Muslim conferences and everybody would like everybody, and there was that emotional bond. Everybody like would hug and be fun and laughter, but then they either you see that they've lost their faith or they will confess that they no longer pray. Some will express fear that they're not sure about their faith. And you can observe some will have either left Islam or their faith is kind of going through either a roller coaster, or they're afraid to come right out and acknowledge that they're not really sure what they're experiencing, and there's a struggle there, or an invitation, if you will, to a struggle. It's important in Ramadan and just in general to let people know that um, if faith was something that does not oscillate, that it's always like everybody's always just on this high that just continues to get higher and higher, and you're always emotionally like in it, and you're always in that super duper positive, and you just are super happy. um, First of all, that's troubling because it comes across as you're like a psychopath, like you are not in touch with your feelings, and you don't experience feelings like of sadness, or experience of pain, or experience of emotions that are, you might say, not so comforting. Um, but it also helps us to the fact that there is a struggle is actually a sign of faith, because if it's easy, then there isn't much value in it. Nothing in life that we ever valued came to us easy. We value things that at times we work very hard for, and it has tremendous value. The degree, if you're a doctor, you've worked many years, loss of sleep, children, you value, the time you've spent, and the energy that you have in terms of parenting them, um, builds that bond. If you were stranded on an island and you had to survive, there were a bunch of people there with you, and you worked together to try to stay alive until they found you on an island. There's a bond that forms in that struggle to stay alive, or you start to value that relationship because it has broken you to a point of where you're bonding at a level of not just survival, but you're trying to come close together, to struggle, to remind each other, to help each other, because you're facing together the need to survive. If you're even experiencing oppression and you're coming together, like in prison inmates, and you're trying to comfort each other over issues that you have experienced, and you're giving each other, if you will, some advice on how to help each other. That struggle that forms a bond, if you will, and the situation puts you in where you surrender even if you don't like it. You're forced to surrender, and it doesn't come, if you will, doesn't come easy. It you first try to fight it, and you struggle, and then you are forced to come to terms with the struggle. But this is also a way of how life is, and I would like to just not take too long because I'm trying to make these podcasts very short. Um, but if I can take you to chapter 19, verse 58. This is the chapter Maryam. And I'm going to just record the reciter, or that have use his voice to recite the verses. It's verse 58, as I said, chapter 19, Maryam. And I like this verse, if you will, a lot. If you just listen to it with me for one moment, I'm just going to put Husayri because I like the reciter. Husayri.
أولئك الذين أنعم الله عليهم من النبيين من ذرية آدم وممن حملنا مع نوح ومن ذرية إبراهيم وإسرائيل وممن هدينا واجتبينا إذا تتلى عليهم آيات الرحمن خروا سجدا وبكيا.
I would encourage you to go to the Quran and to read it yourself. But the one I want to focus on is the very ending of this particular verse. That when the verses of the most merciful, God, were recited to them, they fell in prostration, like, if you will, tears of adoration. And because the verses are no longer just, kind of like a robot. Like you can now program robots. I was just watching Al Jazeera. You can program robots to read Ibn Attallah quotes or aphorisms. You can give them a recording of, and they can do it even in a very good Toastmaster skills, and they could recite it in the best voice and in the best way, but there's really no life experience there. There's no struggle. There's no it was difficult and you had to go, like with Noah, like it's the verse says, we carried the ship Noah, like he's now struggling, and with these 80 people that followed him to stay to the faith and within the faith. The descendants of Abraham, of course, we have not any of us experienced what Abraham, upon him peace, has experienced alone. Imagine what it's like to be worshiping God alone. And I don't think any of us really appreciate that story. Just try to imagine having to be the only person worshiping God on earth, and of those and of whom we've guided. But that when the Quran is read, they fall down in prostration and weeping, tears of adoration, because you're recalling that there's that bond that forms, that bond of the struggle, that bond of staying faithful, that bond of turning to God when things were not easy, remember like experiencing God in difficult moments, difficult experiences. You usually form these type of bonds when you are experiencing faith. And it's kind of like when, if you ever had like an acquaintance or a friend and you went through a very difficult time and that person was there, and then you recall a moment, like remember when this happened, and you both are remembering the exact moment. That moment has in it embedded feelings and embedded emotions and embedded, if you will, thoughts, and you both start to just recall that moment and the tears. So the verses were not just words that a robot would just say. And somebody who's practiced Toastmasters and they're excelling at Toastmaster skills would just say. But if you were listening to them, you're not seeing that prostration, or you're not seeing come out of them those adoring tears of faith. I see it at times when I listen to Ramadan Bhuti. That's why I like at times listening, because you see that like there is that that human experience with his Lord. Like at times, like when he's speaking, it just you see it. It's a natural process of like he's experienced God with these verses. Whereas just someone who's excelled at Toastmasters, and they're just saying they read something that someone said and they found out a way to like claim it as their own, and they're polished it up, and they have 10,000 memes, and they're amplifying all these quotes and memes with their name on it, and they've never really experienced it. So what I want to end with is, if you're not feeling it, and if you're not in it, and you're not this super duper positive in the Ramadan spirit, or you're feeling you're slipping away, or you're losing your faith, you're in the struggle. And the faith is about struggle, and you should continue with the struggle. And there's nothing wrong with you turning to God and just being, quite frankly, honest with God, that you can turn to God and say, I'm feeling like not so hopeful this Ramadan, or I'm being honest with you, I'm like my faith is now I'm like slipping, or I'm not feeling it, or I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't have that khushu' that people positively preach and promote. It's not there. It's okay to have that conversation with God and say, I don't know what that means, but I'm finding it difficult to pray, or I'm finding it difficult to read the Quran. And genuinely, you don't have to make it public, because it's just and you're just here establishing a connection with God. And as you do that, the idea is to open up with your feelings and your experiences and your struggle to God, and ask God to help you. Ask God to help you, like you would, like if you're on an island and you need to survive. And then over time, what you find is, as you're continually struggling, the Quran goes from being words, like I said in the blog, where you start to just polish up and put on, decorate your walls with, or polish it up in these videos, and you're getting all these, and it becomes where you read this verse and you're like, oh, I remember when I was talking with God about XYZ and I was reading the Quran. I didn't feel like even reading the Quran at that time, but then for whatever reason, that verse just stood out, as though that was the first time I read it, even though I've read this chapter many times, but just for some reason, that verse right now. And so you start to experience the Quran, and you start to experience the Word of God. And you keep going and you keep going, and then it becomes more life experiences and more life experiences. And it gets to a point where at times when you read a certain verse and you're like, I remember the first time that verse just stood out at me in the Quran, and it becomes like now a memory of a connection between you and God. And you can kind of like pause and just, praise God. Because I remember that time. I remember when I was really having a bad day, and I was very honest and genuine with you that I'm really just not slipping, but I pushed myself and I got up and I prayed, and then I saw this verse in the Quran that reminded me of you and how to continue. And I remember that. So now it becomes a bond, and it becomes a connection, and it becomes an experience, and it becomes memories that like where you are now holding the God's hand, like the handhold that never breaks, and you're just holding on. It's kind of like somebody, like you're going up on top of the mountain, and they put their hand, and you're praying that they don't let go, because you're the one who's gravity is pushing you down, and they need to help pull you up. And you start to appreciate that God had pulled you out of that situation, and you look back at it, and you all of a sudden now the verses have a different light or a different feeling. Now it's like a personal conversation that you've of course it's revelation, but it's also that personal connection, that emotional connection. You remember there's a bond there, there's an experience. And so I invite you, if you're not in the Ramadan spirit, or in the practicing, or in the worship spirit, just turn to God and actually share those feelings, those thoughts, and that truth. Just don't do it in an accusatory way, like because just say, this is how I feel, and this is where I'm at. And to be honest with you, I really don't like this person. I really don't like what they do, and I'm just going to be honest with you. The feelings that I'm supposed to have in my heart are not really there, and God helps you with that. You don't have to turn to God as a prophet. You can't turn to them with your human feelings and your human thoughts, as long as you're not into the you accusation, and you're being honest with where you're at. Then read the Quran, and slowly you will find yourself connecting with God, and connecting with God, and connecting with God. And you'll look back, and hopefully, and I pray that we all experience genuinely and sincerely that when the verses of the most merciful are rehearsed to us, that we have that experience, that we fall down in prostration and adoration and adoring tears, because we are recalling that bond and that connection and that memory of, so that the verses now are embedded with love and an emotional connection. So I thank you very much for listening in, and I hope this was beneficial for you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.